Today I'm going to Mun in Kerbal Space Program. I'm in sandbox mode because I'm still not very good at this game, but I'm learning, and if you're new to Kerbal Space Program, maybe you can learn something by watching this video. Now I haven't launched at the ideal time. Normally you would want to be flying towards Mun at your apoapsis, but I'll just time warp to an ideal position. My spacecraft here is pretty inefficient. You can't control the throttle on the solid rocket boosters, so I'm burning a lot of fuel fighting the atmosphere at a high velocity all the way up. Ideally, you want to keep your velocity under 300 meters per second as you pass through the atmosphere. Now I'll get myself into orbit of Kerbin using my Rocket Max fuel tank, which has plenty of fuel for this and to get all the way out to Mun later. The most efficient way to get to Mun is to burn your engines in the prograde direction, the direction you're traveling in, and be aware that burning prograde on one side of the planet will cause your orbit to extend outwards on the other side of the planet. As you travel along your orbit, Mun will also be traveling in its orbit, so if you burn prograde towards Mun, you'll meet it on the other side of Kerbin just as it arrives there. So it's incredibly simple to find a trajectory that will get you to Mun. Just point your spacecraft towards it as it comes up over the horizon and burn. Of course, to get the velocity right, you'll want to plan your maneuver a bit more carefully than that. I always throttle down as I approach my target velocity. It's ridiculously easy to overshoot your target, which just wastes fuel. Now my orbit around Kerbin brings me close to Mun, but I'll be passing it too quickly to get into orbit, so I just need to burn retrograde, backwards, when I'm close to it so that my ship can fall into orbit. I could just set this orbit up to land me on the surface of Mun, but that tends to land me in a deep crater, so I'll set up my orbit and try to pick a relatively flat area to land. It's basically craters everywhere, but it's worth trying because even a 5-degree inclination is pretty much impossible to land on for me anyway. I'm just burning retrograde to bring my orbit down to the surface. I'm done with my Rockomax fuel tank. Now it's just the LV909 engine and the FLT800 fuel tank to get me onto Mun and back home. My initial orbital velocity was about 600 meters per second. It's going to take a long time to burn that velocity down to zero, so I need to start early, definitely above 10 kilometers, because you never know if you're going to land on a 3-kilometer high hill. So burn most of it off early, then fine-tune it, and be patient all the way down. It does waste fuel to slow down and then have gravity speed you back up again, but optimizing fuel usage here would require a bit of work. Just be patient, watch your velocity. The biggest problem I had in my first few landing attempts was setting SAS to retrograde, but then overburning and causing my spacecraft to start moving upwards, which changed the location of the retrograde target, which caused me to flip over and crash. You definitely want SAS pointing retrograde, but keep a close eye on your velocity and don't let yourself get to zero. This is not a steep hill at all, and I still almost tipped over. Climb out for a proper EVA. The rocket pack is really fun, but the ragdoll mode the Kerbals enter when they hit the ground too fast is only entertaining for the first few times it happens. They just bounce forever. They have tons of fuel, and if you're careful, they can be a great way to move long distances. I noticed they're too weak to do any lifting on Kerbin, but on Minimus you can launch yourself into orbit with the fuel to spare. I wanted to get a shot of Kerbin rising from the Mun, but just like Earth's moon, Mun here has a dark side that appears to always face away from Kerbin, so I won't be seeing Kerbin rise today. Planning my trip back is easy. Just get into orbit of Mun again. What I almost did wrong here was burn prograde in the counterclockwise direction from the dark side of Mun. What this would do is increase my orbital velocity relative to Kerbin and make it harder for me to get back. What you want to do is burn prograde around Mun in the counterclockwise direction on the Kerbin side of Mun. Since Mun is orbiting Kerbin counterclockwise, if you burn prograde on the Kerbin side, you'll actually be burning retrograde relative to Kerbin, which, as you can see, brings my Kerbin periapsis nice and close to Kerbin without burning too much fuel. At my apoapsis, I'm burning retrograde just a little bit to bring my periapsis down to Kerbin's atmosphere for some aerobraking. I've found that if periapsis is much higher than 30 kilometers, you'll slow down, but end up back in space for another orbit around the planet. Under 30 kilometers will slow you down nicely for a soft landing. You can see my orbit decaying rapidly thanks to the aerobraking here. My surface velocity is also dropping rapidly. I've broken lots of parachutes, so it was nice to discover that right-clicking on the parachute gives you a readout of whether or not it's safe to deploy the parachute. You want to deploy it as soon as it's safe to do so. You can always time warp your slow descent. Mission accomplished.